Hello, and pain heals, chicks dig scars, glory lasts forever. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Sports Month, and this week we are talking the 2000 film, The Replacements. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-hosting scab, Andrew Williams. All right. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. Scab. I've been here.
I don't know. You're here. I've been here the whole time.
Yeah.
Who'd I replace? I don't know, Andrew.
What do you have to tell me?
There's not really a good spin on this. You're the scab, or you're crossing the picket line. None of it's like you're not a replacement. There's not a positive way to spin and make the reference to this movie. I'm sorry.
It just looks bad either way. Oh, well.
But hey, The Replacements. What's your history with this film? I assume you've seen it before. Actually, I know you've seen it before because we've actually talked about this movie quite a lot just on our regular lives. But go ahead and tell the people, what's your history with this one?
I'm pretty sure I saw this in theaters when it came out. I saw like a Keanu Reeves football movie starring a bunch of a few people that were pretty hot at the time, and it just seemed like a really good time. And I'm pretty sure me and my dad went and saw this. So been in rotation ever since. I know I had it on DVD as a kid. Have it now digitally. Watch it, pretty regularly. It's a movie that kind of always is in my head at some point or another. There's parts of this movie that pretty much are part of my regular lexicon. There's aspects of it that I will never be free of. So I would definitely say that this is one of those consistencies throughout my life. Like, it's been there the whole time. It's like, I think about football movies and I immediately think about The Replacements, even though if you looked at any top 10 list of football movies, they would be like Any Given Sunday, all that. And I'm like, give me The Replacements.
Get out of here with that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, mostly the same. I don't think I saw this in theaters, but I saw it plenty growing up. My dad loves this movie. My whole family loves this movie, to be honest with
my
you.
dad
but it
loves this movie.
It's very much a dad movie, but also it has that kind of Jerry Maguire appeal where women like it just as much as men, just maybe for different reasons, and it's only 4 years after Jerry Maguire, which is weird to think about because they seem like they came out in two totally separate eras, but it's very plausible that people saw the success of Jerry Maguire and they're like, hey, let's get more of that, sports movies with a romantic center and try to kind of, strike that balance and find that audience. And man, I love this movie. We're covering it. We're as we say in the intro, we're challenging ourselves to find the positives.
There's no challenge here.
No challenge.
Absolutely none.
It's a good day at the office today. I am very excited to talk about this movie, The Replacements. Let's just jump right into it, Andrew. Set the stage a little bit. The movie releases August 11th of the year 2000. It's made on a budget of $50 million. At the box office, it brings in $50 million. Just over $50 million. So obviously a loss for the studio, and critically, it's not well received. It holds just a 41% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I would not call that panned by critics by any means, but they weren't exactly hot on it.
No, definitely not. This came out, this is 2000. I mean, the idea of the internet was still kind of just becoming a regular thing. Rotten Tomatoes was certainly not something anybody was looking at. But even at the time, I feel like I remember reading that the critics weren't kind to it. So yeah, but 41%, that's, I guess that's firmly in mixed territory. There's a good chunk of people that did enjoy it with a score like that. But overall, did not mix with critics and definitely did not get there with the box office, which is astounding for the greatest sports movie of all time. But it is what it is. But I'm glad we're here talking about it today.
The movie is written by Vince McEwen, who is the sole writer on this film. That is just a rare thing to see. It's
Yeah,
always
that
weird when
seems
a
so
movie's
strange.
written by one person.
Like, just such a weird thing. I don't know what. Like, I had the same thought where I was like, oh, only one guy. Like, really,
One guy.
This feels like a movie that would have been handed to like 7 different people to like punch up and handle throughout production, but nope.
Vince has been in the industry for a while at this point, bounced around, been an actor, been a writer, produced a few things. The most high profile thing, scrolling through his work that I found, was Fly Away Home, which is a movie from the mid 90s that I owned on VHS.
Yep.
And saw a number of times. Anna Paquin, maybe her first movie, but certainly the first thing that I ever saw her in. Same guy wrote The Replacements. Those movies occupy very different places in my mind, so it's pretty interesting to know that those are written by the same guy.
Yeah, only 3 film screenwriting credits to this guy's name. Fly Away Home, The Replacements, and another movie called The Climb that I am not familiar with at all, but stars John Hurt and David Strathairn. But then a couple of TV credits pop up randomly in like the late aughts and the mid 2010s. But like you said, otherwise kind of a character actor from television in the 80s, and just what a strange, interesting career. But good for you, Vince. Bringing us quite an eclectic array of things. Doesn't seem to be doing too much today, but yeah, definitely an odd career trajectory, but I'm glad it happened.
The movie's directed by Howard Dutch, who's honestly a person that I did not recognize that name, but it's a cool name, Andrew, because it's a combination of Arnold Schwarzenegger's 2 greatest roles.
Are you sure it's not pronounced Deutsch?
For the sake of this joke, it is pronounced Dutch.
Yes, all right.
But
perfect.
digging through his filmography, certainly plenty of credits to his name. Some pretty high profile stuff. Was the director of both Pretty in Pink and Some Kind of Wonderful, both films written by John Hughes. Also married to Leah Thompson. So this is like a family like royalty thing going on here. Also director of Grumpier Old Men, a movie that I, again, saw a million times growing up. I love that movie. And we somehow find a way to talk about it like every other episode.
Yeah, it's weird how that movie won't go away either.
Directed a lot of TV after this run of films. This is one of the final film credits he has, but has directed a number of episodes for high profile stuff like American Horror Story and True Blood.
Yeah, a lot of pretty much from 2002 on, he's only got like a couple of film credits, but those early film credits, he's got Pretty in Pink, which is not an unknown 80s teen comedy. He's got The Great Outdoors, so he's getting in with that early. He has a working relationship with John Hughes. The Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, The Great Outdoors, pretty much back to back to back there, and definitely got him through a couple of years there, and then he kind of starts getting into some other stuff. Like I said, he directed 3 sequels to films he did not make.
I was noticing that.
It's Grumpier Old Men.
The Whole 10 Yards, another one.
The Whole 10 Yards. He also directs The Odd Couple 2, which is a movie I forget exists because you guys may not realize this, but The Odd Couple is a film starring Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau in 1968. And those two had this strange, massive resurgence in the early to mid 90s where they suddenly were being cast as old men and everything. And they actually made The Odd Couple 2 30 years later. I had somehow completely forgotten about this. And so when you're talking legacy sequels or long-term sequels between the original and the sequel, this is 30 years. And so I am surprised that I did not really know about that. But so good for you, Howard. That's some interesting credits. But otherwise, still, like I said, still working the day, still doing television. Tons of credits. True Blood, American Horror Story. Lots of horror and even comedy television. But yeah, this is pretty much one of his last films. Cracking right there at the year 2000. And man, can you quantify the year 2000 as a film? Because this film kind of feels it.
It's definitely got the music. We'll talk about the soundtrack, but every
Yeah.
time we cover a movie from this era, we're like, yep, that song is taking me back. It's taking me back to a very specific time.
Yep.
Andrew, before we jump into this movie, I want to do a quick little thought experiment for you here.
Uh-oh.
All right, so imagine that you run a video rental store. I know we're throwing it back. Those aren't even a thing anymore. And you've got to organize all of your movies. And you've got your aisles set up by genre. Single word genre, right? So we're doing dramedies here. These movies are defined by one genre. You can be as specific or vague as you want, but what section are you putting the replacements in?
Comedy.
You were very fast with that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think this is just a straight up comedy, which I, in my head, never really thought of it that way, or at least before rewatching it this time. But I go back and like, they are going for jokes at almost every turn, even serious moments, even romantic moments. There's always jokes being thrown out there.
Yeah.
Like, this is a comedy through and through. It feels a little weird because it's not like it's not a Dumb and Dumber. It's not a Hangover. It's not that overt. But I think the number one thing it's going for is humor. So yeah, I gotta agree with that. I would put this in the comedy section.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was a question.
Well, it's a sports movie. It's a drama. Like I said, it fits into multiple, categories, genres. But yeah, first and foremost, that's that video store that I just kind of described. It's in my head all the time. I watch movies and I'm like, where do I put this exactly? Because sometimes movies kind of ride that line. But I don't know. You didn't. There was no question for you on this one, but ultimately I gotta agree. It's a comedy.
I'm glad there is one last video rental store living on in your head. Makes me happy.
Another genre that I would put this in, and this is kind of like an unofficial genre, is the $30 million movie. Now I know the budget is $50 million. Let's call it an honorary $30 million movie, but it's the kind of movie, just to get a little old man yelling at clouds, just the kind of movie that's not really made anymore, at least not released theatrically by major studios. The $30 million movie has kind of moved to streaming and it's kind of become prestige television. But when you think back of the 90s especially, or like the heyday of the $30 million movie, it is a relatively low budget or modest budget film that is not special effects heavy, that is driven by characters. And the appeal of the movie is just great characters that you want to spend time with and go back and revisit. Movies like As Good as It Gets comes to mind, like a great $30 million movie. Like not high stakes, nothing crazy, just good characters. And this fits right into that mold. And it's become comfort food for me at this point. Because I'm like starved for it, for like new releases. And again, I'm not saying they flat out don't make them anymore. They've just kind of moved to other avenues. And it's that sleeper hit movie that gains like word of mouth, becomes a hit that way. Like My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It might be one of the most recent ones I could think of. And that movie is like 20 years old by now. So yeah, it's kind of faded away. But
I will say the most recent one I can think of, and I would suggest this, is probably Knives Out. Doesn't feel like it with how stacked that cast is, but it's a $40 million movie, and that's now by today's standards. So that's even less money by like these standards. But yeah, I completely agree. And then obviously what happened to the Knives Out sequel? It went to streaming. So just further proving your point there. But yeah, it's this weird thing where just like you would see it feels a little like old man yelling at cloud, but at the same time, like I can't imagine. I guess maybe a little bit. I'm seeing it bubble up a little bit more, especially oddly with movies. Like I just saw there was a big movie that came out lately that was called 80 for Brady, and watching the trailers for that, I was like, oh man, this feels like a movie that absolutely would have come out in like 1997, aimed at like every single older woman in the world. There's another one coming out. They're called The Book Club, and it's about older women reading steamy novels, and then the sequel is They Go Abroad. And so it's this like very it feels like a very 90s thing in a way when I see these. Like, it just flashes me back to this weird, different time where, like, a studio would be like, well, hell, here's $30 million. Go make your movie. Who cares? Like, and they were almost always movies that maybe came out and weren't initially noticed, but would almost always make up their money back with like rentals and, purchases. But yeah, nowadays it feels so different. Like, it's either these micro budget indie hits, things like A24 stuff or whatever, or these massive blockbusters. It feels in a big way like there was no in between for the longest time. Like I said, we know there is, but like, even when there was, it felt like they were still trying to make it feel like a big movie. Like, there's plenty of movies I've watched that have a smaller budget, but you can tell they're really trying to make that budget feel as like bombastic as possible. And you kind of want that low stakes, that kind of just almost a movie that's just kind of watching humans interacting. There's no greater thread there. And I do miss it. So this movie definitely checks a lot of those nostalgia boxes for me.
It also kind of created like this hierarchy is not the right word, but like this path for movie stars to take as they rise to movie stardom. So you look at, like, I don't know, Tom Cruise, before he gets to the big Mission Impossible sequels, he's doing The Firm, he's doing The Color of Money, he's doing the aforementioned Jerry Maguire, before he kind of, works his way and makes that leap. Or someone like, Brad Pitt doing Interview with the Vampire and 12 Monkeys. And this movie, The Replacements, has a pretty stacked cast, but part of that is just from like looking back and where these actors and bit parts would go on to continue to rise in their fame. So you look back and the movie looks a little more stacked than it was at the time. But you've got a few big hitters there at the top of the call sheet, and then like a bunch of journeyman actors and no names at the time, and you kind of got, it rounds out this cast. And that's part of what's missing, because like I think Knives Out is a great example of a modern day $30 million picture, but the studio clearly wanted some like assurance that this was going to be a hit, and they loaded that cast with well-known names and high-profile actors, which you didn't see a lot of in the old days of the $30 million picture. So it's just, I'm not saying it was better back then or anything like that. It's just different, and I just
it kind of is though.
About the differences. It kind of is. Well, all that being said, Andrew, waxing poetic about the old days of the 1990s and early 2000s, it's time to jump into this film, talk about all the best performances and best parts, all the positives of The Replacements. You ready, Andrew?
I am.
When the Pro Football Players Union goes on strike, the league resorts to finding replacement players to finish the regular season. The Washington Sentinels hire coach Jimmy McGinty to recruit and coach the new team. Jimmy assembles a motley crew from unexpected places, led by quarterback Shane Falco, who hasn't played the game since a disastrous performance in a college bowl game. The team learns to work together, lean into their strengths, and begins winning games. But when the pro players begin crossing the picket line, the future of the roster is up in the air. Simple, straightforward, low stakes. That's the way I like it, Andrew.
It's
not to jump right back into our conversation, but it feels like a fresh of breath air to go back and watch a movie like this.
A fresh of breath air.
Yeah,
we're
exactly
leaving that, folks. We are leaving that. You are not allowed to edit that one out. 100%, you cannot. No, it is interesting. I won't lie, there was the Aaron thought that it was like, who's the villain of this movie? Yes, unions. But
you think too hard about it, some stuff becomes a little problematic. But you know what? It's a good time.
I was gonna say, like, this is hardly the first time it's happened, though, because this is loosely based on the actual 1987 NFL strike, and specifically the Washington Redskins, who actually won all 3 of their replacement games without any of their regular players, and then also went on to win Super Bowl 22, I think was that year. And then the quarterback controversy in particular that comes through here is very similar to the one with Doug Williams and Jay Schroeder that happened during that season. So it was a weird to think about as a kid because I was like, is this a thing that happens? Like, do the players just go on strike? And my dad was like, oh yeah. He's like, this has happened before. And I was like, wow, that's wild. Like, I never would have thought that it would like get to the point that they just wouldn't play. But it has. And so obviously we're dealing with fictional teams here. This is they opted to not. I guess the the movie ended up being a whole lot cheaper if you didn't have to use any existing iconography there, which is, it's so funny to me to think about just on a base level that inventing like, 5 new football teams and all associated logos and everything for a movie was cheaper than licensing 5 teams stuff to use in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Honestly,
it's probably the right move because if you do the licensing, the NFL's got to sign off on things and they don't want to be appear in a certain light, and it's like you'll want to have fun with it, especially these characters. Some places that go with it, like just do what's right for the story. Saves you
the hassle. But yeah, it is like you said, it's such a, I don't want to say innocent because the movie's not innocent, but just it feels like a snapshot of a simpler time. And back when sports strikes were the only thing we had to worry about as a people.
How disappointing was it, Andrew, as a big fan of this movie, that when the Washington Redskins decided they were going to change their name and they were simply the Washington football team for a while, looking for a new team name, how disappointed were you that they didn't just do the Washington Sentinels?
I'm still upset.
It was right there. Like, who would have been mad at that?
You would have made a lot of 2000 era sports movie fans very happy with finally being able to get legitimate, authentic Washington Sentinels jersey. Guys, you know how hard it is to find a good one? Don't misunderstand me. You can find them all sorts of places, but are they good? You don't know. You have no idea. That would have made my life so much easier. Thanks, Washington Commanders. It's the Commanders. Sentinels, Commanders, it's the same thing.
It was right there. We were this close. The greatness. This movie is art imitating life. They could have closed the circle and had life imitate the art, but alas, it was not to be. But hey, #PP, they're not the Redskins anymore. So that's
thankfully. I was just curious. I wonder if, I guess the Mighty Ducks is maybe the only instance of a fake team becoming a real team.
Well, there's some good bar trivia there.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
If you can,
sky-eyed viewers, yes, or sky-eared listeners. Let us know.
Sky-eyed?
Well, I just changed it to sky-eared.
I still don't understand. Eagle-eyed?
Yeah, sure, whatever. You got the point. You understood.
If my fresh of breath air stays in, that's staying in too.
Yes, of course it is, Chris.
Look, we got a big cast to get through, so let's do just that. We're going to talk about this cast, starting with the best casting and best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. Now, we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, let the people know, who is getting your Mark Strong Award for The Replacements?
This is a tough choice because I think there are a great many people in this movie doing a fantastic job. But the one that I almost always think about, and the one that always comes back and lives in my head, is I am going Jon Favreau as Danny Bateman is getting my Mark Strong for this movie. He plays this former walk-on player.
Great pick.
Plays this former walk-on player who's now a SWAT team member that comes back to this team, and he's just completely horrifying. Like, he's just the most aggressive, just hyped up player. This guy's Mojo Rawley on steroids, if you wrestling fans know who I'm talking about. Like, he's just he's never turned off. He is always dialed in. And, from when he's accidentally, like, he can't wait for the ball to get snapped, so he's launching himself over the whole line to tackle quarterbacks. He doesn't understand he's not supposed to tackle his own quarterback. Getting tackled by his own team because he won't take the ball down because he's being dumb and burning up the clock. Like, everything he does is making me laugh. He's got a great chemistry with some members of this cast. And it is just so, I just cannot emphasize how strange it is to look at, like, Mandalorian Jon Favreau and then, like, the replacement's Jon Favreau. They don't feel like the same person. Like, Jon Favreau's this giant, like, teddy bear now who's just like, oh, the man's making Star Wars and he birthed the MCU. 8 years after this, folks. Jon Favreau directs Iron Man. 8 years after this, Iron Man comes out. That is...
You know what's crazy, Andrew? 5 years before this, he was a extra in Batman Forever.
Right. Talk
what
about
a rise.
Talk about blowing up. That's extra Batman Forever to Iron Man in what, 13 years?
Yeah, wild.
That's maybe there's still hope for us, Chris. But yeah, otherwise, like I said, I love everything that he's doing in this movie. He is just completely berserk. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And I love everything that he's doing. It always makes me laugh. It's weird that he gets this, like, almost childlike intense focus where, like, the coach would just be like, go out there and get me the ball, and he's just like, get you the ball. He's like running out the field, like, get these. He just hypes himself up over, like, a single, like, 3-word command or 3 or 4-word command, and then, like, does it, and then he's so excited. He's like, I got it. Like,
he's like a slightly more intelligent Bobby Boucher, just a little bit.
Yeah,
tackling
slightly.
Fuel. That's exactly like
yeah,
the same
basically
concept.
that level of intensity, though. And he doesn't have to imagine Fonzie saying water sucks to do it. But yeah, just fantastic. I love the character. He's definitely one of the parts of the movie that just lives in my head all the time. Some of the stuff he says, I think it is absolutely hysterical. So I'm going Jon Favreau as Danny Bateman, getting my Mark Strong Award.
This is a great pick. Jon Favreau, officially a Mark Strong Award winner. I love the sound of that. Whenever you were saying you were having a hard time picking a Mark Strong Award, I was in my head, I was trying to guess where you were going to go. This isn't where I landed, but honestly, you could have said, there's like 5 different people you could have said,
right?
And I would have been like, great pick. I get it. I mean, these characters are great, but yeah, I love this pick. And I love, like, if you look at this movie with a super critical eye, you could be like, well, this character is so inconsistent. He seems really intelligent in normal conversation, and then he's a complete idiot on the field. And it's like, who cares? It's fun. Like, that's really what this movie is trying to do, is just give you a good time and be fun with these characters. He's a great example of that. A lot of my notes are his lines. My probably favorite, one of my biggest laughs in this movie is whenever, like you said, he's tackling Keanu Reeves, Falco, when he's on the same team during practice. And he just, like, knocks the crap out of him. So Shane's laying there on the ground and he goes to help him up. And Keanu Reeves says, go ahead, I'm just going to lie here and collect my thoughts. And then Danny responds by tapping his helmet and going, work it out, right? And then walks off. Like, he's just...
It's fantastic. Like,
you're sitting there contemplating life, right? I get it, man. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, like, this is a normal thing people do. They just lay on the ground and think about things, which perfectly... Hey, you know what? It do be like that sometimes.
It do be like that. Yeah, man, great pick. A lot of fun. Totally worthy. I'm going with someone else. There's a lot of players. There's one player that I really considered, and I'm gonna give him his flowers when we talk about him. But ultimately, I'm not giving it to a player at all. My Mark Strong Award winner is Gene Hackman as our coach, Jimmy McGinty. I love this character. When you think Gene Hackman, I think definitely gruff, rough around the edges, mostly because of like that voice. And you think of some of the more intense roles that he's played, but he is so damn likable in this movie, and he's such a good coach. Like from jump, he's just like this mentor and this guy that is steady throughout the movie. I mean, he doesn't really have an arc in this movie. His arc is that in the beginning of the movie, he tells the owner that he stopped smoking, and at the end of the movie, when they have to use the pro quarterback, he smokes. That's his arc. That's how much his character changed. But other than that, he's just being super supportive of the team, giving Falco like just the right advice at the right time. I'm kind of thinking of, Mighty Ducks we talked about last week, where Bombay has this change where he learns to be a supportive coach. That's his big character arc. And Hackman is nailing that, like I said, from jump throughout this entire movie. He's got a lot of lines that I wrote #PP next to. He's always looking at the bright side. Like in the beginning when they're introducing all the characters and he's telling his coaching staff who he wants to play. And they're side-eyeing him at some of these choices. Like at Falco, they're like, he hasn't played in years. And he simply says, well, he should be well-rested then. #PP. Or whatever his tight end is deaf. And they're like, how are we going to communicate with him? And he just says, look at it this way. He'll never be called offsides on an audible. #PP. Always looking at the bright side, looking at the positives. And like I said, just a genuinely like very sweet presence. I love him talking to Falco and giving the analogy of the duck on the water and his feet below were just kicking really fast. That's something that lives in my head all the time. I think about that analogy all the time because of his delivery here. We mentioned how this movie is kind of not based on a true story, but certainly inspired by true events. And you can see a lot of these characters are kind of like amalgamations of real life players or coaches in this case. He's got the hat, definitely pulling on like a Vince Lombardi or Tom Landry. There's very obvious connections there. He kind of just the epitome of a great classic old man football coach. He plays it so well. Gene Hackman, what a legend. Well, honestly, one of my favorite performances of his entire filmography. Mark Strong Award.
A fantastic pick. There's definitely a lot of inspirations here. Like you've got the hats, which are kind of very much like a Tom Landry type thing. You've got the sweater vests and the mustache, which is very much a Mike Ditka thing. Like you've got a lot of pieces there to just kind of build this kind of just classic football coach. And but like you said, he doesn't really have his only arc is kind of making they hint that there was some incident in the past that seemingly got him fired from the league, and he hasn't been back since. So this is kind of his second chance. And but his only thing is to just win with his players. That's all he really wants to do. He doesn't really have any greater desires beyond that, realizing that once this is over, there's no more to it, probably. But like you said, he's static. He's fully formed when he comes into this movie. He knows what he wants from his players, and it's simply him building that relationship with the players back and forth. And like you said, though, I think this is a great performance. I like it a lot. Towards the end of Gene Hackman's career, he has a bunch of movies that come out in 2001, but I think his last film is in 2003, Welcome to Mooseport. The classic.
That's a movie I saw in theaters, Andrew. Believe it or not.
I may have as well. I very well also may have seen that. It is so yeah, he only, like I said, 2001 he has a bunch of movies that come out. And then he has 2004, for Welcome to Mooseport. But since then has not acted, only done a few cameo appearances and some narration, but not a lot beyond that since. So this is definitely the twilight of Gene Hackman's career, but still with us at 93, which is dang impressive. But I do really like this performance. This is honestly like probably one of the things I most readily associate Gene Hackman with, just because I remember seeing it so much as a kid. Like obviously I've seen Superman. I definitely associate Superman, but like things like The Conversation or Hoosiers, all that comes way later. Gene Hackman loves some sports movies, apparently. Yeah, great performance, great pick. I think he's definitely, you could call him kind of the backbone of the whole thing, like the whole philosophy of the team, the whole philosophy of everything. That's all coming from his character, and he presents it in a very direct way. Like there's a few scenes where he definitely does get frustrated at his players, but it's because he knows they're capable of better. He knows what they can. And that's kind of what he's going for. Is he's trying to get them to where he knows they can be. And by the end of the movie, he does. And you know what, Chris? That is a beautiful thing.
I agree, Andrew. Let's talk about Keanu Reeves, who we got to talk about quite a bit last month during our Matrix month. Our Catrix month. Keanu Reeves plays Shane Falco, the replacement quarterback and star of this movie. We've talked about Keanu Reeves a lot on this podcast already, but we did address that Keanu has always had this kind of thing hanging over his career where some people like to pretend like he's not a good actor, and that's all hooey. This era of his career, I mean, this is after The Matrix has blown up. It's 2000. He's actively making Matrix movies. He's in between the sequels. He is a bona fide movie star in these, martial arts movies. He makes movies like this and Hardball, which is another sports movie, and another movie that seems to come up on our podcast a lot. But I always imagine, like, on the sets of these movies, he was like, man, this is a nice change of pace. This is something totally different, much more low stakes, much more character driven. And I think he does a great job in all of them. I think he's great here. I think the being so unsure of himself, like he really wears it on his sleeves. He's trying to convince himself that he doesn't want to go out there and get the glory, that he's happy with his mundane blue collar life. And you can tell that he's not. Like, it doesn't excite him. It's not fulfilling at all. And he learns that throughout the course of this movie. And I think, like I said, I think he plays it so well. I think it's not. If I had to guess, I don't know for sure. I would guess that he wasn't the first pick for this role. In the year 2000, I don't think you're thinking of Keanu Reeves for this role, and I could be wrong about that. But I think once you see him in it, I think he absolutely nails it and was a great choice. He's gonna get a Mark Strong Award one day, I promise. This is like the fourth time I think we've talked about him, and we always talk about how good he is, but hasn't quite got the Mark Strong Award. But he's just been surrounded by great actors. That happens sometimes, but I think he's wonderful. I think he's great here. A great choice to lead this movie.
I agree. I'd be interested. This is not a movie where there's a whole lot of production notes out there. It's kind of hard to find any real story about the making of this movie, which is unfortunate, because it's definitely a movie where I feel like every day on set was probably just a blast, like between the cast and everything that was going on. Yeah. I'm sure this was like you said, one of the most relaxed film sets Keanu had been on in that time. I feel like on the DVD, I remember watching like a feature where Keanu Reeves even said that, like, he wasn't a football guy growing up. He was from Canada. He was a hockey guy. So he had to kind of learn football for this movie. And they had like football coordinators and football like trainers and stuff. And some of them, I think, cameo as the coaches of other teams and stuff. But we're in that like period where Keanu was like becoming a bigger deal, honestly, after The Matrix. And he does The Replacements, which, I'm super glad he did. I would be curious if there were other names considered and who those names would be. I'm trying to think of like who at the time would have been like your pick for, who's your aged quarterback in the year 2000 that you're going to find. And I don't know. I think he does a great job here. He's definitely got the kind of arc that you're talking about, where kind of the whole first half of the movie, he's kind of fighting against his desire to do this. And then like right when he settles in and he's finally like in, is when they kind of try to pull the rug out from under him. And then he ultimately comes back. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I do love his performance here. I think it's great. Like you said, it's one day he'll get that Mark Strong. He's just being surrounded by some great people.
Something I noticed about Keanu Reeves when I was watching this movie is he is left-handed. I mean, he's playing the quarterback. He's throwing the ball with his left hand. I'm like, that's interesting. And then I Googled it just to make sure he is left-handed, even though, of course, he is. I'm watching him throw a football with the left hand. And I saw that this particular, like the first result on Google points out that a lot of his characters are right-handed. Like Neo is right-handed. And Andrew, I gotta wonder why. Someone's making that decision. Writers or directors are making the decision like, oh, no, this character should be right-handed. And to use Neo as an example, why is that important? Why does that matter? Why would you not let your actor use their naturally dominant hand?
Mayhaps he's ambidextrous.
Maybe, but I'm guessing if he's throwing football with his left hand, and they don't call attention to it being left-handed, because that would have been a choice. If he's ambidextrous, they would have been like, well, you're going to be a left-handed quarterback. But they don't, like I said, they don't really call attention to it. So I think he's using his naturally dominant hand, you know?
That's interesting. It's very weird. Yeah. I've never thought about that before. I do like how Wikipedia does, in his character line, call out that he's a left-handed former quarterback. I don't know why it feels the need to do that, but it does.
Whoever wrote that probably did the same thing I did. Watch this movie and go, wait a minute, Keanu Reeves is left-handed?
Who knows? I didn't realize about the Matrix ones though, because you see him like sign things and like use a pen and stuff, and I guess it's his right hand. So
yeah, they said Matrix is one example. They also said like Speed, and they named some of his more famous roles and said those are all right-handed characters, and it's odd. I don't know why they make that decision.
Who knows?
I don't know. Who knows?
I don't.
All right, we have Brooke Langton as Annabelle Farrell, who is the love interest in this movie. First and foremost, she's on all the posters, smooching with Keanu Reeves. She's also the head cheerleader for the team, because they also have replacement cheerleaders. I don't exactly know why, Andrew, but she's got to recruit a whole new team of cheerleaders to go alongside our new team of replacement players. And she's the head of that. She doesn't date football players, definitely not quarterbacks, but wouldn't you know it, by the end of this movie, they got a thing going. This is definitely the subplot that makes me think that they are going for the Jerry Maguire audience. So they're trying to get the romantic comedy out of it, as well as being a sports movie. And that end is led by Brooke. And I think she does a good job. I think another, talking about movies of the bygone era, another thing that we always talk about is how women leads get kind of put into this box, and their main purpose is just to be the love interest of the main male actor. It is what it is. Hashtag PP. All that being said, I think she brings as much as she can bring to it to elevate it beyond that. I like that she is a football fan. She knows the sport. I like how there's one scene that shows she's just an insanely aggressive driver. Like, it's never brought up again, but for some reason she drives like a maniac, which is a fun thing to add to the character. So, like I said, there's enough to kind of elevate it beyond some other roles we've seen of this ilk. But like I said, handled very well by Brooke Langton.
Oh yeah, I agree. So yeah, there's definitely some more layers to the character than you otherwise might find in a situation like this, especially for a character like that's a cheerleader. Like, don't get me wrong, we'll talk about it later, but the way they play the rest of the cheerleaders is definitely what's the nice way of putting this? Very 2000s. That's about the nicest way I can put that. But she's got this depth and this knowledge. I think that's interesting. Like, just even like she inadvertently reveals that like she's got all these cheerleader friends for other teams, and they're all trading team tidbits back and forth. So like she gives Falco a heads up that some striking player is going to cross the line. They're just not announcing it, so the team can't prepare. And he's like, "How'd you know that?" And she's like, "Friend of mine's a cheerleader, tipped me off." And I'm like, "Man, is it like that? Do it be like that, Chris?" Cheerleader.
All cheerleaders have like a Slack that they.
That's just one. In. Every cheerleader gets added to the same Slack. It's just hundreds of people. But yeah, I do like the performance. I think she works well with Keanu. I think she plays in a very interesting place. Like, because she feels like she was a cheerleader from before that's still there. And I don't know, that's the vibe I always get, and that she has to find like a new squad. And like you said, the logistics of that are a little strange. I don't quite know why the cheerleaders are striking, or maybe the cheerleaders are striking out of solidarity with the players. I don't know, but it's best not to think about it too much. But yeah, I do like his performance a lot. Can see she's still out there doing some stuff. Didn't see her in a whole lot of stuff after this, but here she's doing a great job. I like the character a lot. Like you said, they give her a lot more to work with than some other characters in this position might get.
Let's take a look at the rest of the replacement team. We have Orlando Jones as Clifford Franklin.
Bad.
One of the actors that I would not have been surprised if he was getting a Mark Strong Award. Absolutely hilarious. I love this character. Scenes that live in my head, I mean, I'm thinking of him singing I Will Survive at the bar and at the jail cell. I'm thinking of his scene between one player that is a convict and another player that is a police officer, and he's trying to buddy up and play both sides before he totally puts his foot in his mouth. I mean, he gets like the best comedic bits, and he plays it so well. At the time, I knew who Orlando Jones was because of Mad TV, and he was also doing the 7-Up commercials by this time.
The 7-Up commercials is probably what I
very
really
popular. Make 7-Up yours was a huge thing, and that was him. Shortly after this, he does the movie Double Team with Eddie Griffin. I mean, this is probably the peak of like his mainstream roles, and definitely a standout performance. Still out there crushing it. I mean, I personally haven't watched the show American Gods, but I've seen a clip of him from it, and holy hell,
terrifying! Like he's
so good,
he glowed up big
good.
time. He definitely like really blew up in that one. Getting to really show some chops there. Yeah, he's definitely been out there still doing his thing, which I like. But yeah, in the year 2000, I can't think of anyone that was like defined to that time more than Orlando. Like the 7-Up commercials alone were just everybody saw those. You know, make 7-Up yours. Same to you, buddy. Same to me. Like I love those. Those live in my head rent free at all times. I just vividly remember. You don't get commercials like that anymore. And maybe that's a good thing. I'm not entirely sure, but
I remember one where he's at like a creek in a forest, and the whole pitch of this commercial was that 7-Up was better than like bottled water. It's spring water. What spring does it come from? And like there's a bear in the water, and a log floats by, and he insinuates the bear pooped in the water. Like that one I think of all the time.
Man, what a wild time, folks.
Wild times.
But either way, I think I was I do remember him from Mad TV. Some of his original characters were super funny, and some of the impressions he did. He was only on that show for 2 seasons. It's so weird to think about. Obviously, he is a standout the year after this in the film Evolution. Another favorite of the early 2000s of mine. That maybe one day will make its way to this show.
I think we'll get around to it. I think we'll.
I also love that movie. Apparently, I just had a thing for Orlando Jones in my childhood. But yeah,
what a weird thing you just said, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm running past it. But I do love what he's doing here. I think he plays this character perfectly. He is playing that stereotype of the super fast guy who can't catch the ball. It is literally.
It is a trope, isn't it?
It is in every. If you watch a movie about a dysfunctional football team, this character is present. Whether it's go ahead.
I think we're about to say the same thing. There's always a scene where they use stickum or some kind of glue on their hands so they can finally catch the ball. And Little Giants is the first movie that comes to mind that also uses this trope. Yep.
Another football movie I like that follows. The plot, the overall bones of the plot are very similar. I mentioned it last time. Necessary Roughness has the same idea. That one doesn't do the stickum gag. He just learns to catch at some point. What a concept.
Probably better.
But he's another guy. He's super fast, but every time they throw him the ball, he drops it. And then finally, like one day, he's like, at a certain point, they know he won't catch other teams know he won't catch the ball so much, they stop covering him. So he's like wide open, and they just throw. He's like, throw me the ball, I'm wide open, and they finally throw it to me and he catches it. And I was like, oh, how nice. But literally, I don't think there's a single dysfunctional sports, especially football movie, that does not have this character in it. That's insanely fast, but can't catch the ball. And then I love how once they use the stick 'em once, he can catch the ball at that point. Like, it's like the switch flip. And now he can catch the ball. That's how it works. Once you break the mold and catch the ball, it just sticks around. But I do love this character. I do love his place in the movie. I think he plays really well off the gas. He's got this weird, like, starstruck thing that hits him. Like, he recognizes these people. Like, he recognizes even some of the replacement players for places they were before. And, like, even, like, when they're pulling up and all the Washington players are outside, he's, like, insanely excited at seeing all of these people. And then they're, like, throwing trash at him. And he's like, man, forget you. Like, and then even, like, during the last game, he's like, I'd love to get your autograph. And then he gets, like, destroyed by the other player. So he's doing a fantastic job, and I love everything he's doing.
Next, we have Faison Love and Michael Taliaferro playing Jamal Abdul Jackson and Andrew Action Jackson, respectively. May as well talk about them together because they are always on screen together. In fact, the whole quirk of these characters is that they were very good offensive linemen, but only whenever they were on the same team. They need each other. They got to work together. One got traded and they both fell apart, and they ended up working as bouncers. So now they get to come back to be professional players with that background of being bouncers. They are very large men, as offensive linemen tend to be, very intimidating, and always dressed like bouncers when they're not on the field now. At one point, one of them literally unloads his handgun into our evil pro quarterback's car, and a very satisfying scene. But I love these guys. They're very intimidating, but they also have a sweet side. As you can see, their banter with the other characters and other teammates. Gotta give a very big RAP to Michael Taliaferro, who did pass away in 2006 of a stroke at the age of 44, which is extremely sad. But what a life this man lived. Possibly coincidentally, or possibly a little bit more than that, he was actually signed by the Washington Redskins in 1984. He was at one time a pro football player. Here he is in the movie inspired by the 1980s Redskins, which I thought was pretty fun. Then he turned to acting after that. A lot of bit roles. This is probably one of the more high-profile things of his career. And lastly, a native Texan. So gotta shout that out, even though he's from Dallas, which is like our worst city. But gotta represent Texas.
You guys hate Dallas, so weird.
Hate Dallas.
But no,
Andrew, you're from Houston. You hate Dallas too. You have to.
I don't think about Dallas, Chris.
That's even worse.
How is it
South
worse?
Oklahoma, we call it. Not thinking about it it's like, like a wrestler's the worst thing is not get a reaction at all. You don't even think about it enough to hate it. It's not even on your mind.
Yeah. As things that I don't care about should be.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad we had this conversation.
Should not care about Dallas. It sucks.
I do like that he was signed by the Washington Redskins in '84, and he actually played 2 seasons in the USFL after that, a shortly lived 80s football league that was an alternative to the NFL. Did feature a Houston team, the Houston Gamblers. Another favorite of my dad. Really loved Jim Kelly and his run and shoot methodology. So, like I said, might actually be one of the only former football players in the cast of this film. But like I said, a cool little tidbit there. Big rest in peace to Taliaferro. He has got some great interactions with the team. I love some of the stuff he's doing here. And then Faison Love, obviously, been doing comedy pretty much his whole life. Pretty much been still out there doing stuff, and then been in just bit parts in film and television forever. But they are really good together. They are really good with a lot of the other actors in this movie, and they do a fantastic job.
Next, we have Ace Yonamine as Jumbo Fumiko. Jumbo Fumiko is his name. This is a sumo
a 2000s movie, folks.
This is a sumo wrestler turned football player. And Andrew, the first thing I say about this guy, He is adorable. He
He is.
so cute. I was watching this movie with a friend of the show, my wife. She had actually never seen it before. Did enjoy it. It gets her stamp of approval. But she says the same thing every time he's on screen. He's like, he's so cute. Look at that face. I gotta agree. Other than like when he's like shoving whole eggs in his mouth, that's
Jesus
a little
Christ.
that's gross. But otherwise, yeah, I love this guy. He's cute. He's adorable. He is very gentle giant teddy bear type character. Played super well. I guess the other scene that's gross is his biggest scene where he throws up on the field.
Oh no!
Causes the other players to throw up. But yeah, I was looking at his filmography. Definitely bounced up in other places, but much smaller roles. I think this might be his most high profile role. But I absolutely love it. Great addition to the team.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a shame because I think he is particularly great in this. Only like I said, I'm looking at his IMDb. 6 credits. That's it. That is not a whole lot. Plays the sumo wrestler in Memoirs of a Geisha. And just not a whole lot there. But he is fantastic in this movie. I really like what he does here. I think he interacts great with the rest of the cast, especially with the Jackson brothers, the kind of adversarial relationship that kind of turns more as they build their own camaraderie. That is one of the other stories of this movie, is obviously this team coming together, and his relationship with the Jackson brothers is definitely one of those minor things that I think is really, really well done. And Nanda Ska is something that also lived in my head rent-free at all times, when he would just demolish somebody and then say that. But fantastic stuff.
Troy Winbush plays Walter Cochran, who's a former pro player whose career was ended with an injury and is now getting his second chance. After leaving the league, becomes a minister. So through most of his scenes, anytime he's not on the field, he's dressed like a minister. He has the big cross. He's holding the Bible often and speaking about peace and love and protect, looking out for your fellow brother.
Yeah.
You know where this is going. You know at some point he's got to turn violent. He's got to throw a punch, and he does. And it's satisfying when it happens.
Man, that scene is so great. We'll talk about that more later, but I love it.
It's great. It's good stuff.
Much.
I mean, this movie is just really some of these players have bigger parts than others, meatier parts. This is one of the smaller ones, but there's enough to define this character, give him something to do, and make him stand out. That it's that $30 million thing, where it's just a cast of characters you want to go back and hang out with.
I agree. I think he's got several lines in this movie that definitely stand out to me. Like they have a big blow up at lunch where like the Jackson brothers, Fumiko, and the kicker all kind of get mad at each other, storm off, and he just goes, "Jesus Christ!" And Cochran is like, "You praise his glory, Nigel." Just like not even questioning it. So it's a great performance. Him and Shane definitely feel like they get a big like, just kind of both being in that like we're in the pros and then kind of never really got their shot. So they definitely have a good bond that forms there. And he does a great job. And it is nice that he does get his moment towards the end of the film at the cost of his knee again. But a great performance. Like I said, it's so weird to me that like all of these actors, I'll see them in like bit parts and something else. And I'm like, oh, from The Replacement. Like I know vividly who these people are because of this movie. But like you said, for a lot of them, I think this is as big as it gets for them.
Dude, if you ever meet Keanu Reeves at a convention or whatever, it's what you got to say. Dude, I loved you in The Replacements. Yep. How often are people saying that to him?
Never. Absolutely never.
Moving through this team, we have David Denman as Brian Murphy. He is our aforementioned deaf tight end. And Andrew, David Denman is these days most known to people as Roy from The Office. This is one of those things where like, I watched this movie a ton when it came out. I watched The Office when it came out. Never dawned on me that it's the same guy until years later. I go back and watch this movie and I'm like, holy cow, why did I never realize this? What I love about this is ever since his breakout role as Roy from The Office, I feel like he's kind of played this very specific thing where he's not quite like a douche, but he's clearly a character that is rough around the edges and he don't like for various reasons. And I think of He has a supporting role in Logan Lucky. Great movie. You should watch it, Andrew. I tell you this all the time. Yes. But he plays our main character's ex-wife's new husband. So just kind of by nature of the story,
the Pierce Brosnan and Mrs. Doubtfire there.
Yes, exactly. Like he's not a bad guy by any means, but he's not our hero, and you're
not supposed to like him.
Exactly. So it's just kind of this inherent unlikability is kind of what's defined his career now. But you go back to this movie, and he's so likable. I will use the word cute and adorable on him as well. He's just that. Just he's one of the younger players, like I said, extremely likable and empathetic, because they say flat out, like, the fact that he's deaf is the reason he didn't get a pro career. He's an athlete and he's super talented and capable, but no one gave him the chance, and now he's getting the chance. So that alone, you like him. He gets mocked and picked on by some of the pro players because he's deaf, and then he gets to stand up to him, and that's a great moment. He gets to catch the game-winning touchdown at the end of this movie. I mean, this is a big role for David Denman, but still, I didn't know the name until The Office, oddly.
Yeah, he's actually, like, I've actually associated him with a few things more recently where he plays kind of this typical dad figure. He was in a HBO show called Mayor of Easttown, where he plays Mayor's ex-husband, and he's also in the evil Superman movie Brightburn as as kind of our Pa Kent analog in Brightburn. He plays that role. And he's really good at it, because in that movie, Pa Kent is Pa Kent, and he's trying to stop his son from going down this dark path, and he's not able to do it. So as you can probably guess how that pans out for him. David, also an alum of the show from our Power Rangers episode. He played Jason's father in that film. Getting to come back around here. Now, I guess I will briefly address the elephant in the room. David Denman is not deaf. He is not. These days, you would certainly hope a character like this, they would be able to find a deaf actor to play. I do think the way it is treated is pretty good. Obviously, this is not really for me to say necessarily, but like you said, he's made fun of, but it's by the bad guys. He gets to stand up for himself. The team all has his back, which I love. Like, all of them never really question that he's on their side. They don't let these things happen to him. So a lot of signing from people throughout. Like, every time Shane is in the huddle and he calls a play, he also signs it. And I think stuff like that is really cool, and really, like, there's early on, one of the coaches is like, how am I supposed to talk to him? And Jimmy's like, learn to sign. And he's like, oh, no way. And he's like, hey, and again, I love that of Jimmy's character in the same vein. Like, no question to him. He's like, he's deaf, but I don't care. This guy's great. He's going to do good things for us. We'll figure out the rest of it. So.
That coach that says, how am I going to communicate with him? Jimmy says, learn to sign. One of the more understated, I guess you could call it a joke, one of the more understated through lines of this movie is that coach does learn to sign. And throughout the rest of the movie, you see him yelling out the plays. They use, code words, they yell the plays, and he's signing so that Brian also understands him, but he doesn't know ASL, clearly. He's making up his own sign language. So one play has the word rack. It's like a rack B, and he holds up like 2 cups under his chest for the word rack. And then there's like eagle, where he does like a very obvious, like the way a 5-year-old would do a bird and stuff. So he's finding a way to get the point across, which is...
Those are 2 different coaches, Chris. I just feel the need to point that out.
I'm sorry. There's 2... Okay. Thank you, Andrew. The point is, the coaches find a way to make it work.
Yes.
And I think it's very sweet that, like, they don't officially learn ASL, but like they do what they can, they
make it work.
They make it work. Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. Like I said, the final play of the game, like, Shane's like, who wants it? And he's like, you want it. Brian wants it. He's like, he wants it. He's like, let's do this.
Yeah.
I like that. I like the character. So like I said, it is unfortunate, obviously, that they were not able to cast a deaf, or they chose not to cast a deaf actor at the time. But I think the character is treated really respectfully, and I think a lot of the conversation around the character is relatively positive. And they also do mention that he went to school in DC at Gallaudet, which is a notable university for people that are hard of hearing. I had a friend that went to that university. So I like that, again, we've got little things like that in there, calling out to that, and just calling out to that community. So I think that is cool, and I think it is a great performance.
This brings me to Andrew, probably the person that was closest to getting my Mark Strong award before ultimately going with Gene Hackman. Rhys Ifans plays Nigel Gruff, also known as the Leg, which is what most people call him. Man, I love this performance. Rhys has been in a ton of stuff. I mean, he's in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, which, I've noted I'm a very big fan. And you've seen him pop up in a million places, but this is probably the first role that I ever saw him in. And it's what I think about all the time, anytime I see him pop up. I think of the Olay chant. Probably the first time I heard the Olay chant, which is, of course, huge in soccer. But I love this character. I love how much of an a-hole he is. I mean, he is not nice to the team. And you look at him, he's scrawny. He is not an opposing figure. Anyone on this team could kick his ass if they wanted to. He does not care. He is insulting them to their face. He is bringing up Shane's disastrous Sugar Bowl performance right to his face the very first time they meet. He's always smoking on the field. But damn it, Andrew, he can kick a football, and that's what he is there for. I love the character. I think it's absolutely hilarious. I love, you know what word lives in my head rent-free, Andrew? Wiry.
What?
Wiry.
And the one thing I could say about our one offensive, wiry. We are wire.
I love it. It's great. And he, quick shout out to the screenplay here. He's a character that, I mean, what I've said about him so far is enough to quote unquote, be worthy or justify his existence. I mean, he's a kicker. He's funny, gets a lot of laughs. But also there's this layer where we see him at his pub that he owns and where he spends most of his time getting into, bar fights and shenanigans. We see him get shaken down by some people that he owes money to. So probably muscle for loan sharks is the implication. He's got a gambling habit. And it comes full circle in the end of this movie, in the last game, where the enforcers are there in the stands. He sees them, and he doesn't have the money, and he cannot focus, and he cannot make this kick, and the team has to call an audible. And the team, Shane Falco specifically, has his back, and he covers for him. Even though, based on the earlier interactions, he certainly was not obligated to, but that's what you do as a team. It's a nice moment. It's very small because he's one of the more minor characters on the team, but he's got an arc. He's got the story that comes into play in the final game of the movie, and it's good screenwriting because that's the kind of thing that didn't need to be there, but it's just one more bow they can tie at the end of this movie to make it that much more satisfying, and it's very well done.
Well, and yeah, I don't disagree that he starts off really kind of adversarial with the team, but I think a lot of them are that way with each other. But as the movie goes on, he obviously feels a greater camaraderie with them. Like when they get into the big fight with the other team, there's no question what side he's on. He knows who he's with. Like, and there's this respect that comes with it, and it kind of culminates in that final scene where Shane has his back too. But I also do really like the sequence where Shane finds out he's off the team, and Nigel is like, "No, we're not. You're not. The team needs to understand what's happening. We're not going to let you just walk out of here," and kind of fade into the sunset. So I like that a lot. Like I said, so I do think the character does grow as the movie goes on, and that kind of adversarial relationship softens. He's still rough around the edges, but it's definitely a kind of a mutual respect as the film goes on. But yeah, this character is. This was the first time I ever saw this guy. Every time I see him from then on, I was like, "Oh, that's Nigel Gruff." Like seriously, for so many people in this movie, like even Jon Favreau, in a lot of ways, I was like, "That's Danny Bateman." Like, I started like I told people, I was like, "Man, Iron Man directed by Jon Favreau? No way." But yeah, this is a great performance. The character I like a lot. Like I said, he makes the most of every single scene he has. He is making himself stand out in the best way possible, and it is great.
Two final performances, the shout out. We have Brett Colin, who plays Eddie Martell, the best quarterback in the league, we are told. But he's
such a jerk.
He's this Sentinels quarterback that is on strike, and yeah, he is a jerk. He is very mean to the replacement players, unnecessarily, a bit too far, I would say. And always rubbing into their faces. You're not even a has-been. You are never was, he says to Shane Falco. I mean, you're just waiting for this guy to get his comeuppance, and at the end, he gets it. Where he is, even though he's eligible for the game, he gets taken out at halftime in favor of Shane Falco. Great performance because you hate him so much. It's what you like to see in your villains and your bad guys. Additional shout out, another native Texan born in Houston, one of the good cities in Texas. U of H graduate, got to shout that as well. So major props going your way. Probably mostly known as a TV actor, though. Shows like Falcon Crest, The West Wing, and Lost.
Definitely has gotten a little bit of that geek cred in later years. Obviously played Thomas Wayne in the Joker film. Has a couple of animated roles and some DC stuff as well, but definitely...
I always forget that's not Chris Cooper playing Thomas Wayne. They look so much alike.
Yeah. All right, that one I'm willing to give you. I'll agree with that one.
Thank
you. But yeah, otherwise, like you said, kind of a veteran television character actor. But yeah, anytime I see him, I'm just like, you're Eddie Martell, man, and I hate you. But definitely gives off that air of like the legacy quarterback that's just been around, probably getting towards the end of his career. But definitely still considered, like a Tom Brady-esque type, kind of, where you got that, that kind of stature. That's definitely the stature they're trying to give him, at least. But yeah, I hate this dude from this alone. Anytime he's playing a good guy, I never trust it, because I just assume at some point I'll find out that he's a jerk who says $5 million a year sounds like a lot of money. It is. It is a lot of money, Eddie Martell. I know you're not real. I'm calling you out anyway.
And then lastly, Jack Warden plays Edward O'Neill, who is the owner of the team and the one that selects Jimmy to be the coach, and ends up being a bit of a bad guy at the end whenever he wants to revert back to Eddie as soon as he crosses the picket line. So again, much like Gene Hackman is embodying various head coaches, this guy is embodying various billionaire owners of the NFL that we've all seen. A little bit of Bob Kraft in there, a little bit of Jerry Jones mixed in there, and plays the role very well. But just looking at his name, Edward O'Neill, I'm a little upset they didn't get Ed O'Neill to play this. That would have been fun.
It would have. Jack Warden himself, no stranger to football films, actually got nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Heaven Can Wait, which is a sports fantasy comedy drama directed by Warren Beatty, about a...
See, where does that go in the video store, Andrew? I don't know.
Heaven Can Wait would probably go in the comedy section. But yeah, that's another football movie. Jack Warden plays not his doesn't play the coach. That was in the 70s, and he was also plays Coach George Halas in the movie of the week version of Brian's Song with James Caan playing Brian Piccolo. So Jack Warden himself, no stranger to sports films and sports dramas and sports comedies. And this would ultimately be his last film. He would, this would be the last credited role he has. He would retire after this, and then would pass away at the age of 85, 6 years after this. So a heck of a run there for Jack Warden. Rest in peace there. But I
mean, dude also, was a World War II veteran. He lived quite a life,
and he fought 13 bouts as a welterweight boxer. Dude was no slouch, for sure. But yeah, he's not in the movie a whole lot. Definitely just bringing in that energy of like, do what's best for my team. Like, he brings in Jimmy with this kind of promise that like, you get to do whatever you want. And of course he goes back on it by the end of the film, but naturally, Jimmy's instincts and Shane's heart win him do the thing he wants to do, which is get his team to the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. And, how great are you, Martell, if you haven't taken your team to the playoffs in 7 years? Jerk. Yeah, it is a limited performance, but he does a great job. There's things that there's a line he says in this movie where he talks about a rhesus. Or he talks about I've seen monkey shit fights at the zoo that were more organized than this. And I say that all the time.
You do, and I never realized what it was from until I watched this back for this episode, and I was like, that's where he got it from. Andrew's always quoting that.
It's genuinely a great fear of mine that as I expose my friends to the films that I love, they slowly realize that my entire personality is just a patchwork of all the things that I love.
Andrew, we spent a lot of time going through this cast, but it's a deep cast, and they're all worth shouting out. But now it's time to talk about the scenes of this film, specifically the best scenes and our personal favorites. So, kick us off here, Andrew. When is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is your favorite scene in The Replacements?
I gotta go with the second half of the final game. I feel like there's a lot of scenes I love in this movie, and we'll talk about them. Don't worry. And then I'll go off to play some hockey, just in the ultimate irony. But it's the culmination of like everything that Jimmy has been teaching these guys. It's the culmination of every character's arc at this point. They've all reached the point that they know how to play together, and it all comes together, and they're able to win this game. And it all begins where they're down like 17-0 at the half. It's not looking good. And Jimmy's on TV. They ask him, what are you guys going to need? And he says, you need heart, which is what he told Shane he had. And so Shane at that point is like, gotta get to the stadium. So he gets to the stadium very fast. I guess everybody's at the football game, so there's no traffic. But it's a big moment where like Martell is in the locker room and just none of these guys respect him. Honestly, if I was probably picking a singular scene, it probably is this halftime sequence. Specifically because they're down. Martell is clearly checked out. He doesn't care. Like, obviously, he's just doesn't care if they lose this game. He's blaming everybody else for his problems. He's throwing to nobody. He's got no consistency. He's not listening to the coach's direction. He's doing whatever he wants. And it's costing the team. And so at halftime, he's trying to blame everybody else. And the entire team, you can tell, just does not respect this man. He's not the quarterback they've come to play with. He doesn't play like that guy. And he has no desire to play with these people. You can feel it, what he does. You can just tell that he resents these guys. And he's wanting them to look bad. He's basically, Martell's whole thesis of this last game is, I'm going to lose and I'm going to basically blame it on these guys because I'll get away with that. And he says it. Nobody could beat Dallas with these losers. So Chris, here we go. Final of this game is Washington beating Dallas, which I'm sure you enjoyed quite a bit. But
Dallas
but
sucks.
Yeah. Oh, man. But anyway, this leads to Shane emerging, and the team is stoked. They are beyond happy that he's there. Jimmy tells them to suit up, and they're all ready to go. And you can tell again that the mood shifts. It goes from being cynical to being optimistic. The team is now hopeful, and the team is now solid again. It's a great sequence, and then that leads to our second half where kind of everybody pays off. Everybody gets their moment. Everybody's making a big play. Cochran gets he scores, but he busts out his knee again. Brian, like you said, gets the big play. Wilkinson gets his play. Everybody's doing their moment, and they showed that over these 4 weeks they play as a team, and I love it. It's the ultimate, it's how you want the story to end, and I like that the story. It's a personal victory because, as Jimmy's kind of ending narration says, this is the end for these guys. There's nothing else here. They're not going to the playoffs. It's not like Washington. It's not like the Washington organization is going to let them keep playing. The original players are coming back. And I kind of always like when a sport, like, don't get me wrong, I don't mind a movie where they win the championship, but I like when the stakes are more personal. Like I mentioned Necessary Roughness, how the culmination of that movie, that was a couple weeks ago, I think, but the culmination of that movie is not that team of college attendees that are not legacy football players winning the championship. It's just simply beating the best team in the regular season in their last game of the season. And that's it. That championship team has only lost one game. They're still going to the playoffs. They're still going to go to the championship. But on that one day, that team of poor nobodies was better than the championship team. That's exactly what this is. This is a team that will not exist once they all leave this locker room. It is the end for them. But on this day, at this time, they were the best team in that league. And that's as good as it gets.
I agree. I love that about this movie too. I as you said, when the sports team wins the championship and that's your finale, that's great and it makes a lot of sense. But when you can find meaningful victories in other ways, I think it's important for a lot of reasons. I mean, one, just for variety. You don't want your team winning the championship in every single movie that you watch, but it's good life lessons. It's not all or nothing. It's not you're at the top of the heap or you're nothing. Like there's victories, meaningful victories to be found everywhere. And this movie manages to do that with each replacement player's individual story and what this game means to them, because it's all different. Some of them, this is a shot to get back into the pros. Some of them, like you said, they regardless of what happens, there's no way they're going to be in the pros, but they can have this moment. It means something different to all of them, and it's really well done in that way. That's not to say this is a totally fresh way to do it. I mean, your star player showing up at halftime. When Shane shows up, I can't help but think, remember when Bobby Boucher showed up at halftime in the Mud Dogs Bourbon Bowl? Do you? It's a trope that we've seen, but as we've said in previous episodes, the expected outcome doesn't mean it's the bad outcome. Sometimes it's just what makes it a good story.
Well, and I like that, in The Waterboy, if you're drawing comparison, I like that in The Waterboy, the reason he's sitting out the game is very different. I do like that the reason that Shane is not in the first half is because this guy is cross. It's an absence that fits more naturally into the story, but it also exposes at the heart what the root of the whole problem is. Like at the intro speech, and again, I apologize for making you have to censor stuff. O'Neill is talking to McGinty, and he says, "Man, those are all football names." Like 100%,
right?
Yes. But he's talking to him, and he's just like, "I'm talking about a group of poor nobodies, people who want to play, not a bunch of bitchy millionaires." And that line has lived in my head for a long time because it's something that I think happens a lot, where you just, especially in things where there's high stakes play, people just forget that it's about the game sometimes. And Mortel illustrates that perfectly in his return. He's playing with a group of players that have proven themselves to not just be capable, but be good, but he can't play with them because he doesn't actually want to play football. That's the difference. It's heart. It's desire. It's, for Martell, he's had his glory already. He's got his 2 Super Bowl rings. He doesn't care. And so they have, I think, by the movie showing that he can't win with these people and Shane can, I think it actually works really well with the story. Like you said, very reminiscent of, remember when Shane Falco showed up at halftime and the Sentinels went to the playoffs, do you? But I do love how that factors into this story. Beyond Kathy Bates randomly appearing as Shane Falco's mother. But I do. But yeah, like you said, is it the most fresh take on the concept? Like I just named another movie that literally does essentially the exact same thing. 15 years before this. But yeah, I love it all the same.
I should say this is also my favorite scene of the movie. There's a lot of scenes I like. We'll talk about them as you said, but it all coming together. Like, I've got to pick this as my favorite scene. I mean, it's just knocking the dominoes down that have been set up throughout the movie. I already mentioned that Brian gets to catch the game-winning touchdown. I love that part. I talked about the leg and his gambling story catching up to him. Like, it's good stuff. And I used this line in the opening of our episode here, but I love in the huddle, it's time for Shane to lead his team. And Shane Falco, true to his character, he's learned to be a leader, but he's not the inspirational guy. Not giving the big speech to get everybody riled up. Very true to himself. Very true to like the blue collar nature of his character. He flat out says, I don't have the big speech. And he comes up with the best he can off the top of his head. And he just says, pain heals, chicks dig scars, glory lasts forever. Let's go. It's great. It is simple. And it's memorable, and like I said, it's not the kind of thing that gets you fired up, but it's like, yeah, let's just go play football. Let's just go play the game. Let's just hit it all out there. That's why we're here.
Maybe it won't fire you up, Chris.
But, do you get fired up when Keanu says that?
I do. Because I think it's an interesting thread, and it ties into kind of what I said at the end and kind of into McGinty's ending narration, where this is not about, none of these guys are going to get endorsement deals for soda or cereal or sneakers or any of that. But in that moment, like you said, it's the glory of knowing that on that day you beat the best team in the league. And it does last forever. You're never going to you will never ever have that taken from you, because that game is in the history books and people are going to remember. People remember games like that where the completely unexpected happens. And it's no exception. Upsets are always remembered. It's not uncommon, or it's a little uncommon. Otherwise, it wouldn't be uncommon.
Hey, I'm a Houston football fan. I know all about upsets lasting forever. Even after your team moves to another city and changes their name, everyone remembers the Houston Oilers blowing the biggest lead in championship game history.
Excuse us, folks. Chris and I are going to have an existential crisis for the next 20 seconds or so. Give us a minute.
But hey, we got a new team, and they're
a young team, Chris. They're going to pull it together soon.
Young team. They're over 20 years old at this point.
that team can legally drink now. But no, I just love that for years. We got
baseball now, at least.
Yeah, I just love that for years. That was always the excuse. It was always, they're a young team. And I'm like, we're not that young, guys. Seattle Kraken, an NHL expansion team, are going to the playoffs in their second season. It can be done, guys. But
rough.
The Kraken rule, though. Crack house.
Is that really what the fans say? Crack house?
Some do, yeah. Some do, because they can't. It was right there. They couldn't pass it up. But you can cut that if you need to.
No, that's staying. That's hilarious.
But
crack house.
But yeah, I love the notion of it. I love the story of it. I love the emotion of it. And there's a scene. We'll segue into this. Another scene I really like is the scene where they're talking about fear. Although this brings up a side point that I'm bringing up. There are a lot of very weird editing inconsistencies in this movie, where there's just weird things that just jump out of place. Like when Falco returns to the field in this scene we just both talked about, he's running through the end zone, but then at one point they show him running down the sideline, and then they cut back and he's running in the end zone again. And it's weird stuff like that, where
that's how scene, you've seen this movie a lot, Andrew. Yes. When you start picking up on stuff like that,
there's the scene where they're talking about fear in the locker room. The way fear is written on the board changes between different takes. You can see it. The E has this lower hook on the bottom that comes and goes between the scenes.
Isn't that weird? I feel like
that's literally somebody's job. That's so strange.
But you gotta wonder, how does that happen? As many movies as I've watched, and I've tried to learn as much as I can about filmmaking. How is either A, that whole scene not shot in a day, or if it's multiple days, how do you not write it once and
just leave
it there forever? And
the only thing I can assume,
guess Gene Hackman has to be the one to write it. So if they shot that scene multiple times, they don't know which one they're gonna go with, so they film the follow-up scenes with one of his. I don't know. It feels like there's a way to do it, but
I feel like it was just an oversight that they were like, oh well, we're gonna run with it. And like you said,
no one will ever notice it. No one will ever make a podcast about this
who would find out?
Years
How would they find out? They're never gonna find out. But I do really like this scene as well, because it ties into the other thing, which is that all of these players are glad they have a second chance, but they have this fear of blowing it that exists in their heads that's holding them back. Not just Shane at this point, but everybody. They have this whole, they dive into the comedy where he's just like, what scares you? And he's like, spiders. What do you...
No, I mean in football.
You mean spiders on the field? I love that sequence. Spiders on the field great. Is something else that I say all the time. But I love this.
I love that sequence because they pushed it so close to going too far, because they're like spiders on the field and snakes and other stuff that scares them. Yeah, and they keep bringing up stuff that is clearly not related to football, and it goes on for like a bit, but not too long. It is
Right
still
as it's about to
hilarious.
get out of control, Shane is the one that pulls it back, and he talks about quicksand. And again, Orlando Jones is like, "Oh man, quicksand's like launches into this whole diatribe about actual quicksand before Shane kind of talks about it." And he talks about that sense of too many things going wrong, and this is true for all sports. It's true for life. Just that idea that everything's going fine, and then one thing goes wrong, and then another, and then another, and then another, and you can't breathe at a certain point because you're in over your head. It's gone too far. And it kind of sombers the room up, and they all realize that what they're afraid of is going back to their old lives in lots of cases, and that's holding them back. And so I do like this scene a lot too, because it shows Jimmy kind of forcing the team to talk about what they are kind of holding inside, and it forces the team again to kind of open up to each other and realize that we're all kind of dealing with the same stuff. And for some of these guys, like you said, this may end up being that thing that makes some team go, "Hey, this guy's still got some juice left. Let's get him, does he have another shot?" But for some of them, they know it's not coming back around. And but this is a particularly great scene. Like I said, you get to see Jimmy's coaching ability. You get to see Shane kind of being the leader of the team. And then you kind of get to see the team kind of all slowly coming together in a coaching sense, not so much a bar fight sense. Man, I love this movie so much.
My very first note is 3 letters, Andrew. It says lit and a bunch of exclamation points.
This is my introduction to lit, man.
Yes. Lit, one of my personal favorite bands. The movie opens with their minor hit Ziploc. It kicks off the movie. It's what's playing over the opening credits. Takes you right back to the early 2000s.
Great song.
To start your movie. Love it.
Great
Good
song.
Stuff.
Great song.
And shortly after our introduction to this movie, we move at a very good pace right into Jimmy assembling the team. And we get a nice montage where we get introduced to all the characters. This is also one of my favorite parts of the movie because of how efficient it is. Again, we're not breaking new ground here, introducing characters in a montage and letting us know like the one thing that's going to define their character. But we get to see Danny in a SWAT uniform tackling people. We get to see Franklin working at a mini mart, but he's able to chase down a shoplifter with ease. And of course, when the shoplifter trips and throws the item that he stole, he cannot catch it. I mean, it's telling us everything we need to know about every one of these characters, but it's like the movie begins here, and then we get to just keep living with these characters for the next nearly 2 hours. I think it's a very, again, not the most original way to do it, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's efficient. It gets the movie going, and we don't stop from here. I love this opening.
Yeah, this is a great. It's your classic montage. You get all your players. You get introduced to everybody. I love that the Jackson brothers, the Jackson twins, whatever they call them. They have their moment where they're like bouncers for some rapper, I guess, and they get a phone call like at night outside this club that's like, "You guys want to play football?" And he's like, "You're kidding me." And he's like, "We don't need him anymore. We can play football." And they're both just like, "Football? Football." Yeah, and they're all, they're super excited about it. But you get that insight into everybody's personality at the same time. Yeah. I think that's good. It's effective. Like you said, it's a trope for a reason. And if it's effective and it works, don't break the mold. You don't have to. I do love the introduction to all these characters. Man, this is just such a great cast for this movie. Everybody is like perfectly cast, I think. Like even the people that I'm not super familiar with are there. I guess we do need to shout out real quick. John Madden and Pat Summerall do act as the commentators for all of these football games. Again, we're not actually using NFL iconography here, but they do mention the Super Bowl, so like they're kind of really just like playing up that it's the NFL in all but name, basically. But yeah, John Madden and Pat Summerall both just along for the ride too. I do love that we get John Madden like narrating one of the more ridiculous plays they have, just the classic John Madden drawn on the screen, kind of illustrating everything that's happening. I love it.
Yeah, it really lends some I don't know if believability is the right word, but that football feel. But hearing those familiar voices, and they are like real commentators, because if you put actors in that role, they're gonna imitate a commentator and play it up, and you'll lose that like authenticity. So using the actual commentators and voices that everybody knows, I think just lends so much to the film. And one of the scenes that, like I said, while I was watching the movie, I'm kind of thinking, what genre is this? The one that made me like really decide, oh, this is a straight up comedy, is during the peak romantic scene of this movie, when our lead guy and our lead girl finally share a kiss. It's narrated by John Madden and Pat Summerall. They're giving the commentary of the game we're about to jump to, but the things they are saying about Falco taking one last shot are lining up with what we're seeing on the screen, where he's about to kiss her. And then it ends with Falco scores, which is, it's hilarious.
Wonderful.
Like it's going to sound a little backhanded, but it's undercutting its big romantic scene with comedy. And I don't really mean undercutting in a bad way. If you're in this movie for the romance, it's still working. You're not losing that, but it's not missing an opportunity to interject comedy, even into its, more serious scenes.
Right. I agree. I do love that sequence too. Because finally the moment that the will they, won't they tension between Shane and Annabelle kind of finally comes to pass, and we kind of, do that thing. We all do the thing, guys. We're all waiting for it.
Speaking of that scene, what an interesting song choice.
Oh,
every
man,
breath you take.
Sting would be so upset.
Have you listened to the words? Do you know what this song is about? Of course, the segment they play, I guess you can interpret it as romantic, but that is not a romantic song. I thought that was an interesting choice, to say the least.
Yeah, I love when that scene gets brought up because, or I love when that song shows up in a romantic sequence, because like there was an interview with Sting genuinely when he said people would be like, "Oh, that was our wedding song," and he's like, "Really?" He's always like, he always is kind of taken aback, because he's kind of like, if you listen to it, it's kind of like, what was I listening to? Oh no, I just saw Air yesterday, which great.
Hey, it's Sports Month. Thumbs up, thumbs down. How was it?
Thumbs up on Air. Way up, way up.
Awesome. Way up in the
great movie.
Sky.
Way up in the air. Dang it! I ruined your joke. I'm sorry. But I'm so sorry. But no, there's a whole sequence where Jason Bateman's character is talking about Born in the USA, where he's talking about how driving in, he'd listen to Born in the USA, and he's pumped and he's psyched, and he's all like Born in the USA, and then he's like, and then another day I actually listened to that song, and I was like, oh,
yep.
I think I had that conversation with you once, where I like pointed out, it's like all these people that think Born in the USA is some super patriotic song.
Politicians will use it like in their campaign trail, and it's like, wait a minute.
And then I think you may have even like finally looked at the lyrics and were just like, whoa, what? I had no idea. But yeah, it's every breath you take is the same way, where I'm just like, didn't listen to it, did you? But either way, we'll let that go. The soundtrack of this movie, I guess if I can take a moment to speak about the soundtrack, it's a very weird soundtrack. Because there are like things like Lit. Like Lit opens this movie, which is a very topical song. Like obviously, or not topical,
of the times,
of the time. Like it's a relatively, but then you get songs like Bust a Move. You get songs like a lot of classic like sports songs, like Taking Care of Business. Things like Good Vibrations by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch show up. But then what I find most interesting is that there are 3 songs by the Rolling Stones in this movie. All 3 of them are from the Rolling Stones album Voodoo Lounge, which was an album they released in the late 90s. And I just find it very strange that 3 songs from a Rolling Stones album in the 90s, the same album no less, all ended up in this movie and are all featured relatively prominently. I'm
3 is a lot. There's some agreement, producers
well, it's not like,
exchanging
it's not like
money.
Any of them were. It's not like any of them were like super well known or hits either. Like they're this like strange selection of songs, like Blinded by Rainbows and You Got Me Rockin', and I can't remember what the third one is. But just a very odd thing to notice that there's so many. I guess Rolling Stones songs is not the strangest thing in the world, but 3 songs from their late '90s album, which I guess may have been seen as a comeback. I don't remember. I wasn't paying attention to the to the whims of the Rolling Stones at the time. But yeah, so weird, so strange.
And then at the center of this movie, you have "I Will Survive" by Gloria Gaynor, which this is probably my introduction to that song.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, unless I just heard it kind of just around in other movies and stuff. But certainly, again, the movie I think of anytime I hear that song now. And just what a eclectic choice. You've got the music of the time, it's sprinkled throughout the movie, but you're not. Then all of a sudden you have an '80s Police song for your romantic scene, or "I Will Survive" as like the centerpiece of the whole movie. So I appreciate the eclectic nature of the soundtrack.
As do I. It's a great soundtrack. Genuinely. And then you have the Wallflowers on this soundtrack. Another relatively it's a David Bowie cover, but still a relatively topical band. Or current.
Before we move on from John Madden, I gotta shout out my favorite line of his. It's during one of the big play of the game. He says, "Welcome to Strike Football." That would have been Strike Football would have been a cool movie title. And I just love the term Strike Football. I kind of instantly fell in love with that term, Strike Football. So if they ever, come around to this concept again of replacement players, a movie about it, I nominate Strike Football as the name of the movie.
I agree. It's John Madden's great. Also, rest in peace, John Madden and Pat Summerall. I believe both of them have now passed on. Pat Summerall a great many years ago, and John Madden just a couple. John Madden also having a cameo in Little Giant. So John Madden loves his underdog football movie.
Now, Andrew, we've established we both love this movie. We've highlighted some positives. One thing I want to touch on, we've talked about this a little bit off mic, about this movie specifically. I think we've brought up the concept on our show before, but it's the concept of a pre-9/11 movie. Something is different about these movies pre-9/11. It's something that's hard to really put your finger on, but the word that comes to mind is innocence. Like if you were to really look at some of the stuff in this movie, the fact that the cheerleaders are exotic dancers, the fact that the exotic dancers are ditzy, because of course an exotic dancer would be ditzy, the fact that one of the players is essentially a cop because he wants to beat the crap out of people. You look too close at some of the stuff. The anti-union message of the movie, it can get problematic very fast. But not to excuse any of those things if you do have that problem with the movie, but I think the movie gets away with it by and large because of that innocence feeling. It's very clear that those things aren't the message or the intention of the movie. We're not looking at those things. Those are all just set dressing to tell this fun story, and you have a good time with it. And again, I'm trying to say this carefully because I'm not trying to excuse any of the problematic tropes that existed back then, and some still do. But movies of this time just are so not concerned with that stuff in a way that quite frankly, is a fresh of breath air.
Fresh of breath air. Yeah, it like you said, it's so hard to put your finger on it, but it's like you just kind of feel it. Like it's just, a movie like this today, and I don't say this in like the whole you can't make jokes anymore way, but like I just struggle to feel like a movie like this would get made today. Just because I feel like if you're going to do a football movie today, they'll want it to be some kind of inspirational story. But it's like a fluff movie about football just feels like something they wouldn't do anymore. And it's interesting to think about. But I used Knives Out as an example of like a modern example of a $30 million movie. But even that just has like that air of prestige around it to a degree, just because that cast is so stacked, and
Yeah.
that
And
it's
I love the movie, right?
Yeah.
But it's a murder mystery. But also, if you look underneath, there's this message about classism and racism in America. And it's like, that's great. That's great. I like it. But it's not the same kind of fluffy comfort food that these are.
Yeah, I was going to say disposable, but disposable is not really the right word. But yeah, like you said, there's this kind of, that $30 million movie was very much a movie that was surface level only, or it was designed to be surface level only. There was never meant to be any deep analyzation of the replacements. But it's interesting to think about, but it is an odd turn.
I do gotta wonder. I mean, we keep defining it as pre 9/11, and certainly, I guess this is gonna sound such a weird thing. I can't believe I'm saying on our podcast, but that was a turning point for our country.
It was.
Why are we talking about it? But I think that does factor into it. But also, you've got the rise of the internet and eventually social media and issues, certain social issues becoming more well known, and people that would not have thought about these things in their day-to-day life now are conscious of them or think of them. And once that cat's out of the bag, you can't turn that part off and watch a movie or write a movie or create a story without thinking about those messages. So I think it's just one of those things where like context matters, where you can watch a movie like this and take it for what it is, versus if they made this exact movie now, you know that the creators know what we know now and they're still making the choice to make it. That's when you start running into that thing. So I think it's 9/11 part of it. I think the internet's part of it, social media. It just kind of led to this kind of sea change where you got this divide of, again, pre 9/11, post 9/11. All that being said, even at the time, the fact that they bond over the phrase, "That's why girls don't play the game." I don't know why. That's come on, guys.
Yeah,
guys. In 2000, you could have done, but hashtag
your cheerleader girlfriend would kick your.
Yeah.
Don't even question it, Shane. No, it is very strange, and like you said, I think people really underestimate that, because you hear about PC or whatever at the time. That's what it was. It was PC. You were being politically correct. If you were, Batman and Robin has a joke about political correctness, which is such a strange joke to be in that movie. But, and I think people don't realize that there is this kind of, ignorance seems like too harsh a word, but you're just not aware of it, which is literally ignorance, I understand, but it's not malicious. But then, like you said, once that cat's out of the bag, suddenly you can't turn it back off. So like the strippers all being cheerleaders and all being not smart, like that's just something you wouldn't do today. Like you wouldn't do that. And I'm not saying the people that made this movie did that out of malice. There's plenty of 90s comedies you can watch where there's a lot of not unsimilar things being done. But there is a shift. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad shift inherently. But it definitely creates a different culture. I'm just saying everybody in this movie mostly is still alive. So where's my sequel?
Just to bring back some of this stuff we're talking about, back to the hashtag positivity podcast, talking about these cheerleaders, and yes, there's the problematic side that we've acknowledged, but the scene where they all start dancing exotically, intentionally to distract the other players, and they're all too busy looking at them that they screw up their own play, and even the refs are looking. Dude, whenever the coach of the other team gets mad and starts yelling at the ref and says, "That's bullshit. That one girl slapped the other girl in the ass."
I love that the coach is the only one who's like immune to it. Like he's the only one that sees it and it's just like, what? What? I would
that
also
away. We're here for football.
Stop her from shaking their ass for 2 minutes.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I do. I laughed.
Pre 9/11 comedy,
now,
baby.
Even now, I still laughed. I thought it was funny.
Good.
But
good. What a movie!
What a great movie. I guess I do want to talk about the bar fight, because the bar fight's really the first moment where they say, we could talk about this movie forever, but we're already way deep in, folks. But I just want to kind of wrap it up with the bar fight, because I do love this scene. They lose their first game. It's very close, but they ultimately kind of don't. don't stick the landing, and they kind of go to the bar. They're kind of licking their wounds. They're all together for some reason. There's no requirement that they hang out together after the game. They just are. But they're there, and then the striking team comes in and is kind of making fun of them, just like, ha ha, you guys suck. We all knew you'd suck. And it kind of leads to a tense standoff where Martel punches out Falco, and everything gets super tense. And then finally, Falco 6 Bateman on Martel, and it just breaks out into a melee. And this is really, again, arguably the first time where the team actually kind of bonds together, because, enemy of my enemy kind of situation, where they're all forced into a situation where it's like, oh, well, these guys are making fun of all of us, so I guess that means we're all on the same team right now. And so they beat these guys up bad. They win this fight definitively. And of course, because they're the poor nobodies, they're the ones that end up in jail. And then obviously this leads to the jail cell sequence where they dance together as a team to I Will Survive, which is, I think actually that's in one of Vince Lombardi's books, that if you need to get your team to bond, 70s disco is actually the best way to do it.
Proven strategy.
This is proven strategy. I think Ditka used it too in the 80s. But but this leads to the team kind of actually coming together, and McGinty kind of scolds him when he gets him out, but ultimately is kind of like, wish I could have been there to see Martel get his ass kicked. Because he's the kind of guy you want to see that happen to. And ultimately they kind of leave. But you can tell that it's a turning point for the team at that point, where like there's a different layer now, because we've been through even something as minor as a bar fight together. And we're now going to move on and try to see if we can turn this into something. And they do. And it's fantastic. But this bar fight, I actually love that this is the sequence where Cochran is being peaceful and he's trying to keep it all calm. And then finally, like, somebody runs into him and he just starts fighting. And I love that he starts quoting scripture. He says, and I will deliver you into the hands of brutish men. And he punches a dude and he said, this is Ezekiel 21:31. That's exactly what Ezekiel 21:31 says. And I will deliver you into the hands of brutish men, those skilled to destroy. And the Bible is wild, folks. It really, really is.
Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?
Have you seen this? Heard about this? You guys heard about the Bible?
It's wild stuff.
It's wild. That's how I describe it. I'm not even joking. But it's a wild book. But I love this sequence. I love it. This is where Fumiko sits on the guy and says Nandeska, which is like, what is this? Just kind of questioning all of them for being kind of, not great opponents. And again, these are guys that are just kind of rich jerks. They're not from the streets like these guys, but it's a great sequence, bonds the team, and I love it. And obviously the jail cell sequence, dancing to I Will Survive, that's also lived in my head rent free forever.
Yeah, line dancing to I Will Survive in a jail cell. What an image. Yeah, bar fight's great, and the leg gets a great line. He kicks a guy in the crotch. They're bent over, and before he gives him the final kick to the face, he says, "Football, bitch." It's great.
Great. Fantastic. I even love that Nigel in that fight, like, he's the smallest guy. No hesitation.
But he's wiry.
He's wiry. He's wiry. We're wiry. Wiley. I also love that when Jimmy's talking about him, he's like, has he stayed in, or the coach asks, like, has he stayed in shape? And he's like, by Welsh standard, which means he drinks all the time. But I love that even in that fight, Nigel Gruff has got no hesitation at fighting these guys. They're bigger dudes. They're bigger than him. No question. Dude knows what he can do and does it. And of course, Clifford Franklin's hiding behind the jukebox, which they make fun of him for later. But guys, this movie's great. You should watch it. It's really fun. It reminds me of a simpler time, Chris, when I would go to the movies with my dad. I don't go to the movies with my dad anymore.
Hey, everyone, go watch a movie with your dad. You won't regret it. Well, Andrew, that is 2 sports down. We got hockey. We got football. Coming up next week, we got basketball. So making our way through all the majors. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, it's time for the question of the week. If you want to ask us a question for a future episode, you can. Hop into our Discord. There's a link right there in the show notes, or send us an email, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. This question comes from Dr. Douglas, who asks, which is better, Three Ninjas or Surf Ninjas?
Surf Ninjas, next question.
Surf Ninjas is your answer.
Yeah.
You were so quick with that. You were so certain that Surf Ninjas, the Rob Schneider Surf Ninjas from the 90s we're talking about, is better than the bona fide classic that is Three Ninjas that spawned 3 sequels of various returns, but 3 sequels nonetheless.
Excuse me. Surf Ninjas, the Ernie Reyes Jr. vehicle.
Okay, look, I can't argue with that.
Watch yourself there. Watch yourself there.
I like how you lean on Ernie Reyes Jr. and not Leslie Nielsen.
Because Leslie Nielsen as Colonel Chi is a little problematic, Chris, and I like to not talk about it. But
I will say that Surf Ninjas definitely has the cast. As easy as it is to make fun of Rob Schneider or make Rob Schneider jokes, there's nothing wrong with 90s Rob Schneider.
I will say there is at least one Rob Schneider gag in that movie that actually makes me laugh.
At least one. What it is.
That's
pretty good.
At least one. I will say this. It's the line where they're walking and he mentions something about, he's like, well, I wish we could buy some weapons. And he was like, money can't, the guy he's walking with says money can't buy knives. And Rob Schneider just runs that into the ground. He's like, oh yeah, I went to the knife store and they said, no, I will not accept your money because money can't buy knives. And it just always makes me laugh.
I will say this about Surf Ninjas. Thinking back on both films now, there's more Surf Ninjas sticking out than Three Ninjas. Like Surf Ninjas, I think of Ernie Reyes Jr., as you mentioned. I think of Barbara Ann. That's my introduction to that song. I only know that song because of Surf Ninjas. Andrew, this very specific memory I have is me, like you're a little kid and you just do little dumb stuff that you think is hilarious and your parents have to go like, what the hell are you doing? All right. So I tried to sing like all 3 parts of Barbara Ann, like around a corner and my hands, like you do like your thumb, you make like your hand talk or like different parts. So like it's around the corner, one hand comes out singing Barbara Ann, then another hand, and then my face. And my dad's reaction, just ignoring how dumb I'm being, he just like, how do you know that song? I'm like, oh, it's in a movie I watch. Because to me, it's just like a movie from Surf Ninjas, but to him, it's this really old song that his son is singing for some reason. Dumb kid stuff. I remember that. I remember like the end of that movie where like
Moto Surf.
They've got to figure out how to get across the water, and they look at the trees and they picture them as surfboards, and they all like, I guess, cut down these trees and make surfboards on the spot to navigate the water, even though like surfing isn't really a way to traverse water. Anyway, I remember like
here's my single thesis on why Surf Ninjas is better than Three Ninjas.
Okay,
Surf Ninjas,
sum it up for us.
Surf Ninjas delivers on its premise by offering us ninjas surfing. In Three Ninjas, there's at least 5 ninjas. So that movie is a liar.
Oh, but it's about 3 specific ninjas.
Chris,
that is a Johan level stretch
Chris,
if I've ever heard one.
I need to stress to you, I don't care about any of this.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a funny fight because
it's been going on for like a decade, genuinely.
This question is left by a mutual friend, Doug, who loves pitting the 3 of us against it. Although, Andrew, you're like the lone person on the Surf Ninjas.
That's what makes it even funnier to me.
If anyone out there wants to join in on this fight on the Surf Ninjas team, let us know. I'm sure Andrew would be happy to hear from a fellow Surf Ninjas enthusiast.
It would be nice to not be alone.
Pitting it out there. If you're out there, hit us up. Social media, the Discord, whatever's the most convenient. Let us know. And until next time, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
But all movies have greatness.
Even surf ninjas, apparently. Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. The show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sports month and this... I'm sorry. I know I'm going to edit out your coughing, but it's just very funny to just talk through your coughing.
My God.
It's sports month. Jesus Christ.
Sorry.
Let me know when you're good, Andrew.
All right, let's go ahead.
It's sports month, and this week we are talking the...
It's not my fault this time.
I know, not this time. The 2000 film, The Replacements.